Are live. Here we are. Hey everyone. This is Polly Pepper and Auntie Flo. This is our show, Emotional Support Animals, your fur feather family, and featuring their stories. I'm your host, Polly Fletcher, Auntie Flo and Pepper, and today we're going to get to know George, a Senegalese parent, and his dog, his daddy Rob, who's going to share the success story about his habitat. So let's just do a little technical adjusting here and make sure that we are live on our Facebook channel. Here we are. Hi, we are now live. Good to see you. So there we are. And we're just waiting for Rob to join us.
Yes, and Pepper said hello.
Rob's going to join us in just a moment.
Yes, you're saying hello, Pepper. Yes.
And just waiting one more second. Yeah, hey, Pep. So anyway, while we're waiting, why don't we share a couple interest stories that we have going on, today. We were talking and laughing yesterday about, I know, Pep, it was hard to believe, wasn't it?
Yes.
That
Yes.
one of our special interest stories is, I know, what is it? You want a cookie, honey? You want a cookie? Here you go, baby. You could have a cookie. Yeah, we just wanted to bring up our special interest story.
Yes.
Here. Yeah. There you go, baby. Yeah, Pep needs a little bit of help here. He wants his little cookie,
Yes.
his little afternoon treat. And so just don't mind me as we are working through some technical issues. But anyway, Auntie and I and Pep heard about Rocco. He is a rescue parrot, a specific African gray parrot. And African gray parrots are really smart, Auntie, and they are quite talkers. So when his mommy stepped out and he was all alone, can you imagine what he learned to do?
I can imagine.
Yeah, he learned how to use Amazon's Alexa. And he had heard his mom ordering things using Alexa, dialing up music, whatever it is. So she steps out of the house, and what does he do? He starts talking to Alexa and ordering things.
Oh my goodness.
He orders things like ice cream, watermelon, all kinds of snacks. Even a kite starts showing up at the house and they don't know what's going on. They finally realize that he has a relationship with Alexa. Right?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, really unbelievable. Yeah. So, parrots, unlike mammals, and fur children, they have very special needs. They're really quite intelligent. And so Rob is going to share some of those special needs with us about his feather child. And while we're waiting for him to join us, I just want to share a quick little cutout is that in the United States, there is quite a huge crisis and a surplus of parrots and bird species that actually end up getting returned, left abandoned in shelters, in rescue facilities, because people just, don't know how to sustain caring for these kinds of birds. They can live for a really long age, Auntie. They can live till like 80 years old. And so a lot of these captive birds live in situations or they fall out of favor with their adopted families. And so then their needs can't get met. They have very unique behavioral needs that need to be addressed. And thousands of them become victims of abuse, neglect, displacement, and even some even face a fate of being euthanized. It's really, really horrible. And so their welfare is really a big critical issue. And I have some links here as we move through the program that people can refer to if they need to. I put up for them that they can check out some of the wildlife rescue information. I have a great YouTube link talk that talks about the specific care of parrots' needs and helping to promote their welfare, whether in captivity or in their wild habitat. Let's see if Rob's ready to join us here. Rob, are you there?
Yes. Hello, I'm here.
Hi, great to see you. Oh wait, you're unmuted. Yeah, great to have you.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Okay, let's change that. Hopefully you can see me now.
Yes. Hey there. Hey
Hello.
everyone. This is Rob Newdecker. He lives in the UK in London, and his feather child is George. I don't know if George will join us in this pod or our little video cast or not. I know that it's kind of hard for him to be.
It's a little bit hard for him to come into the office without him getting all nervous and unsettled.
Yeah.
So he won't come into the office. We tried earlier in a little cage and he wasn't happy either. So he loves being in the living room where he normally sleeps and lives. That's his room.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't know how much you caught of that, of us talking about Rocco. Actually, Rocco lives also in your neck of the woods in the London area. Did you hear that story come across the wire?
No. What's the story?
So Rocco is a African gray.
Right,
and
okay.
He's a rescue, and he learned how to use Amazon Alexa. And so when his mommy stepped out and left him alone, he chatted Alexa up and goodies started arriving. He was ordering ice cream, a kite, special fruits, all sorts of things started showing up. So be careful of George.
Yeah, we luckily we don't have Alexa. We were tempted, but we thought, no, we better not.
So his mom had to put a special child-proof app on Alexa so that Rocco couldn't order things.
How funny.
Really, really funny.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So goes to the special needs of these creatures, these feathered children that we bring into the house. Hold on just a second. Pep's got tangled up.
Yeah, he's there.
And so wanted to feature today George's success story.
Okay.
So
I've got some pictures for you that we've taken.
Great.
But unfortunately, we need to take some more in daylight. The only ones I've got were in the dark, but with the light on, of course. But they're not quite the same as if they were taken in daylight.
Yeah.
So I will provide some more that are in daylight.
Okay.
But I've got some now that I can send to you.
Sure. So let's go ahead and start with your story about how you adopted George.
Okay. Yeah.
What were kind of the circumstances of George's, sort of issue that you were sharing with me as to how you came to be George's dad?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, it was really George was originally living with some friends of ours who had another parrot called Charlie, and they were living in a very large aviary outside. So they had a very charmed life there. And unfortunately, the two parrots fell out. Charlie was slightly bigger than George is, and George being, well, both of them are Senegals. So they're quite a lot smaller than an African grey would be, and is. And so Charlie was quite a lot bigger than George is, and so he always dominated George in terms of food and attention and everything else. So George became quite withdrawn and very skinny, and didn't really eat very much because Charlie didn't allow him to.
Yep.
And then eventually they fell out, and that then resulted in the parrot world. Once parrots have fallen out, they will never ever make up again, and they will not be able to live together in the same aviary again. So our friends basically said they have no choice but to effectively get rid of George, because they wanted to keep Charlie, who was very close to Xavier, their son. And so he basically had to make the difficult decision of choosing which parrot to keep. And so they were looking at somebody who wanted George, and they said selling it. And I said, no, actually, we quite like a parrot, without consulting my wife first. And basically I brought a parrot home, and we rushed out and got a cage for him and adopted him basically on that very night. And he was very, very shy, didn't really sort of trust us at all, because he was quite sort of worried about what was happening. It was completely new to him. He was very unsettled. So we put him in his new cage on his own, which is a very large cage, with plenty of toys and everything. And parrots are, from what we've discovered, naturally quite nervous about anything that is new. So anything new, they're quite shy, and they even though they're adventurous, but George in particular, he's very scared of anything new. Even if you just put in, for example, a bit of kitchen roll or something like that, anything he doesn't recognize, he will look at it and then sort of gradually back away until he's sort of more familiar with it.
Right.
And so that was the same with the cage and the toys. And so we then initially had him in a conservatory, but it was a cold winter, so we then brought him into the house. Given that he'd been living outdoors in a very large aviary, he was used to the cold weather, but he was just shivering in our conservatory, so we just thought we'll bring him into the dining room, which is what we did. And so he then came in, and he was there for probably about 2-3 weeks or so, and was sort of gradually becoming a bit more trusting towards us, and in particular to me. I'd always had sort of a good sort of level of trust with him, better than my wife, because I think in the past I'd looked after him when my friends had been on holiday, so he knew me a little bit. And then one evening George just simply started talking out of the blue, when my wife and I were in the living room, and then we heard his little voice. And he started talking, and so said night 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 night, and so that was those were his first words. And he never spoke, and they never talked, neither did Charlie, when they were living together at our friend's house.
Isn't that interesting?
So they never ever got to talk, and our friends were really very keen. They tried everything under the sun to try and get them to talk, and they just wouldn't. And so George sort of slowly started to come out of his shell, and with a lot of love and care and attention. And because he was in a dining room, which is a key room in our house, so we spent a lot of time in there, and he's sort of right next to the kitchen, so he was always part and parcel of anything that we were doing. And we parked past his cage, we'd give him a carrot, or some fruit, or some other vegetable, or some other food, or a little bit of toast. He absolutely loves toast. He's also quite partial to a little bit of croissant as well, if you can get it. A little bit
of what?
A croissant.
What's that?
A croissant?
Oh, croissant.
Croissant, yeah. He absolutely loves them as well. If you can give him a tiny little bit, he's in heaven. He loves it. He loves fresh fruit, all sorts of things. And so we also learned what we absolutely mustn't give him, because that will be deadly to him. And that, for example, is avocado and chocolate.
Oh, that's the same with Pep.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. And so we learned it very quickly, and we like both of these things. So we're always very careful that we wash our hands thoroughly before we touch him if we've eaten either of these things,
Right.
so that there's no risk of him contracting anything or getting anything. And so yeah, I mean he's sort of lived in his cage, which we got, and we gradually added more and more toys as well, because and so I've tried to vary it a little bit to keep him interested.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, he's not actually that interested in having new toys. He loves his toys, and I bought him a bell for his very first Christmas with us, which is a metal bell. And whilst he loves it, my wife and I sometimes regret the day we bought it, because he makes such a racket with it. He's so noisy with it.
Yeah.
And he climbs on it and he rings it and plays with it, or he sits down and it just goes, he sort of pushes it really hard, really quite violently, and then he ducks his head down right underneath it, so the top of the bell touches the top of his head. And that sort of sensation he seems to absolutely love.
Oh, wow.
So he does that quite a lot, and so he's very happy. And the other toys, a lot of the toys that we bought him, he wasn't remotely interested in them. He never looked at them. He never played with them. He didn't destroy them. He just didn't want them. Mm-hmm. So we got rid of a lot of his toys. So he's only got a small handful of toys, and we moved him around within his cage regularly. So it's a bit of variety, and he's got 3 or 4 swings in there as well that he loves. And so he gets a lot of exercise. And yeah, and when we moved from that house, he was the last one to be leaving the house. And he was really quite worried that he was going to be left behind, because all the furniture had gone, the house was completely empty, and he could tell that something was happening. But as soon as he got into the back of our car, he was delighted, and he didn't squawk. He didn't get nervous about being in the car and traveling, even though he doesn't travel very well. But he knew he was with us and he would be all right. So he was happy doing that. And so yeah, he's now in our current house, and he's got his own dedicated corner of the house with his own window where he can look out to his heart's content. And so right next to a radiator as well, so it's always nice and warm for him. Because even though he's used to the cold weather, because he was brought up outside, but he loves the warmth as well. And he comes out of his cage pretty much every day when we are at home. So he watches, he sits on our shoulder, and there'll be some pictures which I'll share with you where he sits on my wife's shoulder when we were watching TV. So he sits there and watches TV with us. And yesterday he came out and he sat there with me whilst we were having dinner. And sometimes we are a little bit naughty, and he sort of sits with us at the dining table, and he's got his little bowl there, and he eats out of that, and we have our food. But if it's food that is the same that he can have, then we often give him some of our own food.
Oh, nice.
Because he just likes it. But he makes a massive mess when he does it.
You were talking about that with me last week when we were kind of prepping for this, and when I was doing a little bit of further research about the kind of mess that parrots can make, they talk about that they really have very special needs, very special care that you have to, really be committed to.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the, some of your responsibility as a dad to a feathered child, because they are so lovable, they are so human, especially when they talk and their antics. You just fall in love with them, and you think, oh, I just want to have a bird. But there are so many special needs that they have, and I was looking at some of the statistics that they are some of the highest level of abandonment, but they're also the 4th companion animal. They're ranked 4th as the most popular companion animal that people want to bring into their home, but they are top in abandonment. Because their lifespan is so long, and then their behaviors, their needs, get worn out over time with the changing lifestyle of a family. Can you talk
Absolutely.
to us a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, no, I mean, you raised a very valid point, because it's not just simply a question of getting a bird and buying a cage and, feeding him. There's much more to it than that. And I mean, he does have needs. He needs a lot of attention. Even though he's quite happy being on his own during the day when we're at work, he's very, very content. He loves sleeping. That's his favorite thing to do. As soon as we're out of the house, or even when we're leaving the house, he tells us night, night, see you later, and off he goes to sleep. So he's very happy to do that. But when we're at home, he loves having attention, and he loves having a bath as well. So that makes a huge mess, because he always has a very large bowl of water in his cage. It's very shallow, so that he can't drown in it, because he can't swim.
Okay.
But it's very shallow. But he loves having a bath. He's probably way cleaner than we are, because he has a bath 3 times a day. So it's kind of he loves having it, and he's very happy doing it. But he makes a real mess. I mean, on the walls, on the windows, on the radiators, everywhere, literally. So you have to be prepared for having a mess. And the same time, same with his eating as well. When he's out of his cage, or even in his cage, he does make a mess. And in terms of, he loves preening himself, so he's very clean, and he's currently he's over preened himself a little bit, I think, because he kept having so many baths. So we've actually sort of reduced the amount of water that he's got, so he can't have a bath every 2 minutes. So he's just overdone it a little bit, but he enjoys it. It's pleasant for him, and so yeah, I mean, we he needs, in terms of even his food, you have to be very specific that gets a good mixed diet of food, that he gets treats on a regular basis as well, especially when he's been a good bird, which is often the case. Then he gets a little treat. He just sort of loves being with my wife and I, and he completely trusts us now. He puts his head down, which is and sort of gives us his neck to stroke, which is usually a sign that when a bird does that, then they completely trust you, because that's the most vulnerable point on their body, to sort of give you their neck and sort of literally sort of let you stroke them there. So he completely trusts us now with that, and he sits there and he sort of goes, and he absolutely loves it. But equally, he can also have days when he's in a terrible mood, for no reason at all, perhaps usually in the morning when he doesn't want to get up and it's still dark outside, and he thinks, why are you waking me up? I don't want to get up yet. Then he can be in a mood and he can growl like a dog. We never knew that a parrot can actually growl at you, and he frequently growls a lot more at my wife for some reason than he does at me. I don't think he's ever really growled at me particularly, but my wife gets it quite a lot in the morning when she wakes him up. Then he just growls at her, and he's in a terrible mood for about 10 minutes, and she can't feed him or anything else because he'll bite her and anything else. And after 10-15 minutes, he's absolutely fine. So he's clearly not a morning bird, he's not an early riser. And during the day as well, he can make quite a lot of noise as well. So having a bird is great, but it's not, you definitely need to have either very understanding neighbors or live in a house rather than perhaps an apartment, because he can be very, very noisy, even though he's not big, but he's got a very good pair of lungs on him. And he can, usually what tends to happen is he sits several times a day he just sort of gets into some sort of mode where he talks nonstop for about 10-15 minutes, whether this is language that we understand, which is often the case, where he says all sorts of things. He's got a vocabulary of about 30 to 40 words now, which is actually quite good going for a Senegal. An African grey will say a lot more than that, but Senegals, their vocabulary is more limited. And so he sort of talks nonstop. Sometimes he speaks in his own parrot language, where we're just saying, what on earth are you talking about, George? And he's happy and he loves it. And then he's tired himself out with all the talking. Then he just stops and goes back on a swing and turns his head round and basically goes off to sleep.
Wow.
Oh,
So
You
he's
have such a wonderful companionship and created such a wonderful life for George. You know, he was kind of like at a little bit of a falling out with his previous family, and now he has you've provided a really, you know, consistent, loving home. I know that you shared with me there were times when, you know, maybe George could have gotten the boot and on his way out, but you and your wife really, you know, stood strong and worked it out with George. What are the plans, do you think, for his longevity in his future? Because they do live a long lifetime. How should people plan? You know, I know you can't plan like what will happen in your life, but what sort of provision should people consider for, you know, their feather child if they bring one into their home for their life expectancy?
Yeah, basically what my wife and I, we hopefully will sort of get to the age of how long he lives. I mean, nobody really ever knows, of course, but his life expectancy is about 50 years of age, roughly, around about that sort of. A Senegal or an African grey can live up to about 80 to even 100 possibly. And Senegals are not quite like that. But George is now he's about 10 years old. So he's still, you know, barely a teenager at this point. Yeah. And we both, my wife and I, we said, you know, he will live with us for as long as we live, regardless of where we are, whether this is in this house or any other house or even another country, for all we know at this point. But he will always remain with us. And we've also said, my wife and I, we don't have children yet, but we hopefully will have some in the future. And we're going to have to be very careful how we introduce George to the child, because he does tend to get very jealous. So, for example, I can't give my wife a kiss and he can see us. He starts growling. He gets really, really jealous because he is fallen in love with me. So anything that I do, generally speaking, tends to be fine. But my wife, he sort of tolerates, and he loves her, but not as much as me for some reason. And parrots fall in love with one person for no particular reason, and that's kind of the person that they always go to, no matter what. And I happen to be that person. So we both said, once we have got children, we're going to have to be very careful how we introduce them, or the child to George. And we may have to move him into a separate room on a temporary basis. We'll have to see how that goes, but we're just going to have to be very, very careful, because he can bite quite badly as well. And he's bitten my wife quite badly on a few occasions, which were occasions where we just thought, for goodness sake, what shall we do? Because we can't have a bird that bites like that. Where she was bleeding quite badly. And so, I mean, we are planning as much as we can. And also in terms of when we go on holiday, when we go away for any length of time, we also have to always think, is there anybody who can actually look after George whilst we're away? Because we can't take him with us. He's not like a dog or possibly even a cat that you can take away with you. George just doesn't travel. He doesn't like it. Some parrots do, but George doesn't. And so we always have to make sure we've got some very friendly neighbors now who love him and who look after him whilst we're away.
And Rob, so it's not like you would put him in a birdie day spa, you know, like some people would kennel their dogs, and we have what's called a day spa, spa getaways for dogs. I mean, Pep goes with us everywhere. He is an emotional support dog. We have all of his papers. That I've traveled, to Spain and to Italy, and, he has come with me. But for a bird like George, you really have to find someone who can come into the house, right?
Yes.
You can't necessarily take him to a birdie day spa.
No, he wouldn't like that either. He is very much in his routine as far as his cage and his immediate surroundings go.
Yeah.
He doesn't like to. He even doesn't like it if we move his cage a little bit within the room, which
Okay.
sometimes we do. And for example, now with Christmas, with the Christmas tree and so on, he's actually going to have to be moved a little bit. But we're delaying putting up the Christmas tree as much as we can, so George isn't sort of going to be not inconvenienced. That's not necessarily the right word, but not necessarily sort of put into an awkward spot because he doesn't like it somewhere else quite as much. So we want to try and delay that as much as we can, just purely for him.
And you're being very flexible with, knowing your feather child to make him calm. You've adjusted your lifestyle. Some people would say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that for anybody. I'm not going to do that for, my bird. He's got to go. You've really made a lot of accommodation. And I think perhaps when people do consider getting a bird, would you say that lifestyle accommodation is something that they might need to consider?
Absolutely. I mean, it's impacted us a lot more than what we initially expected. I mean, I'll be honest, we were completely new to the world of owning a parrot before we got George. We never, in our wildest dreams, ever imagined ever owning a parrot. That was never ever on the radar. We'd never even looked at one. We'd always thought that they were cute, but we never ever thought we'd ever own one. And so it just sort of happened so quickly, but we kind of had to learn and read books and get onto internet forums to try and sort of speak to other people. And there are a lot of people out there who have got birds and who do a great job with them. And it's always important to learn from other people. I mean, we learned a lot from talking to other people where they said, have you tried this with George, and does he like that? And I said, oh, we didn't even know we could do that with him, or we should do that with him. For example, when we need to transport him somewhere, he likes being put into a towel. He absolutely loves that because it's nice and cozy, and he likes small spaces. He feels very comfortable sort of sitting up here with the coat, or the jacket slightly open, and he loves being tucked up in here.
Wow.
He absolutely loves that. He's very, very happy there, and he could quite happily go to sleep there. And then you sort of hear him sort of making, little sort of noises that indicate that he's very happy. But we didn't know any of this until we kind of, spoke to people who said, oh, no, we do that. And he loves being, some people take their bird with them to bed. We don't, but some people do. And George, I don't think he would like that, and I don't think we would particularly feel comfortable either. We'd worry about squashing him.
Right. Someone just put in a question, Lauren from Calgary, Canada. She wanted to ask you, do you let George just fly around the house? Like, does he have freedom to, like Pep and her dog, they have freedom. They walk around the house, they get up, move around. Does George have that same freedom, or are there things you have to be careful with him about so he doesn't get injured?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. No, basically George is allowed out when we are at home. And he's more specifically only really allowed when we are in the room with him. And the reason for that is that he can injure himself quite badly if he's not watched. And one of the things that we had to do was at the beginning was we had to get Venetian blinds on all of our windows and the patio door, because we discovered that quite quickly when we first had him, that he flew against the window when we first let him out, because he didn't know that there was glass and he couldn't fly there. So he immediately crashed against the window, and we got really quite upset. So he sort of injured himself, but luckily his beak had saved him. So one of the things is we've got Venetian blinds now in our living room, which are closed, down all the time, essentially, because he's out so much. So they're not fully closed, but he can see that something is there, so he doesn't fly in it anymore. And also he can be quite naughty with furniture. because he's chewed
Wow.
our leather furniture, our leather sofa to
Oh.
pieces.
Oh.
So we gave him a little bit too many privileges when we first got him. And we thought, no, he'll be all right. That's fine. We can just go and take a shower or, you know, do our cooking or whatever it was, and he'll be okay. But if you don't watch him, even for 5 or 10 minutes, he gets up to some mischief.
Yeah.
And he's chewed our wallpaper as well. And he's chewed some books in our bookcase. And I mean, the leather sofa was probably the most serious one because it was very clever as well doing it, because he let himself out of the cage whilst we weren't at home. And we didn't know he could let himself out of his cage. And then he basically chewed the leather sofa, and then afterwards he went back into his cage and closed the door after him as if nothing had happened. And we didn't even realize for a day or two until we saw the mess on the floor.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, you know, they're very, very clever, and sometimes, you know, almost too clever for their own good.
So Rob, how did that not, you know, for
Wow.
some people that would be grounds for dismissal. Like, okay, this bird has got to go. How is it that you resisted that, or that didn't occur to you? What was going, you know, all those feelings when you saw that damage? And also people might want to punish the bird
Yeah.
or the parrot. How did you refrain, or what was going through your mind? You know, I know what goes through my mind with Pep is, you know, Pep's best behavior is really reflected on me. So if he's behaving poorly, then that is a reflection of me as his mom, that I did not set him up for success. So I take that ownership on me, and it's not really a punishment for him. It just means I need to work out the behavior to have him successful. What do you do with George that you didn't give him the boot for all of that?
I mean, I would be lying if I said that we weren't annoyed at first. My wife and I, we kind of we sort of were we were annoyed, but equally at the same time we were really we laughed because we thought he's so clever. He's done it in such a clever way, and to be honest, even though he's naughty and, you know, he growls at us, and, you know, he's got his moments, like, you know, everybody and everything, but he's just so lovely. And you know, the good times, you know, far outweigh the, you know, the not so good times. And you kind of always have to sort of think about that as well, because there was a reason why we got him. And you know, even if, you know, if, for example, if he was a child, a human child, you know, even as a child, I mean, I remember doing naughty things myself, and my parents, you know, basically told me off. But, you know, I was told off and said,
wishing that we would like disappear, or they could return us to the, you know, wherever. I'm sure my parents went through that. Like, where could we return this child?
It's quite possible that might have been the case with me too. It's just that they never kind of told me that, but it's entirely possible, yeah. But no, I mean, we were annoyed with him. I mean, I'd be lying if I said anything else. But we kind of just put it down to, you know, we now know that he can let himself out of the cage. We in fairness, we didn't let him out of his cage for a day or two after that, because we were just so frustrated about it, because it was one of our favorite sofas that we'd had, and that he sort of chewed quite badly, so we couldn't even get it repaired. And so, you know, that was sort of his punishment, that he wasn't allowed out of his cage for a day or so, which, you know, he didn't really mind, I don't think. But to us, it was kind of, you know, trying to sort of tell him off a little bit in an informal way, telling him off and shouting at him and whatever else, that is of no use at all, because he wouldn't know why you were doing it.
Right.
And it wouldn't help him, it wouldn't help us, and it just wouldn't be constructive, you know, and conducive for anything. He would just get very upset and you know, think, what have I done wrong? And because he wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Unless you catch him red-handed, you know, doing something, then, you know, you might want to say no and sort of, you know, take him away from whatever he's doing. And then he'll know exactly what it is that he shouldn't be doing, because we've told him that on a few occasions. And he looks at you sort of, you know, thinking, why are you telling me off? I'm not really doing anything naughty. And you think, yes, you are. And he knows the words, for example, bad bird. When we tell him you're a bad bird, then he knows that and he doesn't like it. So whereas when you tell him you're a good bird, then he's very, very happy and he comes up to you and gives you a kiss. So he knows exactly what it is. But you do need patience. And, you know, parrots, because they're so intelligent, they are really like a small child. You know, you kind of, you know, everybody always says my pet is my child, which yes, they are, but parrots generally are, because they're just so intelligent and so clever.
Right.
And he's got the intelligence of a 2 to 3 year old child. So he understands a lot of things, and he sort of mimics noises in a house. And, you know, sometimes you think, what's that noise? You know, is that, you know, one of the things he does is with the smoke alarm, for example. He also laughs a lot as well. He's copying my laughter, and my wife always really loves that when he does that. Yeah, he's a character. But to be honest, you know, even though he's naughty and he does things and he makes a mess, and you know, I mean, he doesn't generally chew anything now because we sort of watch him very carefully. And even if we leave the room for 10 minutes, then we usually put him back in his cage. And then, you know, when we come back, we'll open the cage again. And often he goes in his cage on his own accord anyway, because he loves his cage. So even when the cage door is open and he could come out, often he doesn't want to because he's quite happy in there. But yeah, he's just, you know, you just need a lot of patience. And in terms of time, both my wife and I are in busy full-time jobs. I also travel for work.
I was just going to ask.
So in that sense, he's actually not demanding at all. He doesn't have a routine in the sense that you need to feed him at a particular time, or wake him up at a particular time, or that you need to let him out of his cage at a particular time. Nothing like that at all. He is happy to see you when you come back from work. You know, he always welcomes us home. When we unset the alarm, he knows the noise and he whistles, and, you know, he welcomes us. And he's not a problem in the slightest. So even if we come back at 9-10 o'clock at night, he will wait up for us. He won't go to sleep until we've actually come home. And we always cover his cage at night when he goes to sleep. That's kind of assigned for his bedtime. And he likes that because he feels protected that way. And he's got his particular blanket as well. That's only his blanket and nobody else's. And so that's kind of George's cover. And, you know, he always sleeps with that. And he knows when he sees it, it's nighttime, it's his bedtime. And sometimes when he's really noisy during the day, and we have guests in the house and we've got friends around, and sometimes he's so noisy we can't even talk amongst ourselves, because he gets so excited or so annoyed sometimes as well, depending on, you know, what's happening. Then we sometimes just put the cover over his cage for 10-15 minutes, and that calms him right down. And then he's fine again, and we uncover him, and, you know, he's absolutely fine after that. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, in terms of time, it doesn't really take an awful lot of time, but you do need to spend time with him on a daily basis. So you do need to let him out. You need to stroke him. You need to talk to him. Let him fly around the room as well, because he does need some exercise. Otherwise, Senegals tend to have a tendency to actually put on quite a lot of weight. If they don't, they love eating more than anything. And so it's quite important for them to exercise as well. And so we often sort of put him on a cushion and then sort of try and sort of carry him around the room and sort of push him off the cushion gently and say, you go off and fly. And then he sort of flies around the room 2-3 times, and you know, then he sort of gets his exercise as well, because that's important too. So that he doesn't become too heavy, and it's not good for him, because, you know, we've never taken him to the vet because he's not needed to. But if we were to, then a vet would be very, very expensive for a parrot.
That's what I was doing a little bit of research in this little call out box that I have showing on the slide here is, you know, they're saying that, you know, depending on your economic resources, that if you do have to take your birds to a vet, or, you know, especially parrots, that the vet visits are much more expensive than a cat or dog.
Yes, absolutely. And I know quite a lot of parrot owners who actually have taken out pet insurance to cover that possibility. I mean, we haven't. If anything were to happen, we would cover that. But we have looked at pet insurance, but fortunately, in all the time we've had him so far, he's been absolutely fine. He's never needed any treatment.
Yeah.
But we do know some people who've had to take theirs to the vet, and it is hideously expensive at times because
And
small
for some
pets are a lot more expensive.
And for some people, it could be a make it or break it in their lifestyle to be able to, keep the bird. That's another logistic or another reason that, especially in the U.S., we have such high abandonment rates of, parrots and bird species because they have just a different kind of level of care that's needed, that can overwhelm a family if they're not, prepared or
Absolutely.
committed.
I mean, it can be very expensive, and it can be quite difficult as well to even get a parrot to the vet as well, because not many vets specialize in birds. I mean, we've got quite a lot of vets in our town, but there's only one, and that is actually quite a long distance away, who would potentially look after birds if we needed to.
Right.
So it's not just any old vet that can do it or will do it. At least not in the UK anyway.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Rob, so much for sharing your story with your feather child. I just, hope our audience just really, appreciates what is involved in the success of, a child like George, so that we can reduce the abandonment rate of all of our fur and feather children. And so hearing George's story is so heartwarming, and knowing that he has, a dedicated parents, and how much joy and fulfillment he brings to your family, especially as it grows in the future. And Auntie Florence has prepared a poem, because she has become a poet because of Pepper, very inspired.
Fantastic.
Pepper has changed her life around. Why don't you just tell Rob a little bit about you while I cue the poem?
Of the poem?
Yeah, I'll cue the poem, and tell Rob how Pepper made you
yeah.
I was going to say a parrot.
Yes. He certainly did. I lost my pet 2 months ago.
Pancake.
That was her name. She was a 20-year-old cat. I adored her, and certainly I miss her. My apartment is so empty, nothing moving around. So I'm still grieving. But, when Pep came along, something clicked. I mean, I fell in love with that dog. And all of a sudden, I started to sit down and write a poem. And from that time on, I've been...
What was your way of communicating with Pepper? So she started with these beautiful poems as a way of communication, sharing, sort of from a humanistic standpoint, as well as from an animal standpoint. So some of them were from a standpoint of other animals meet this friend, see the suffering or the joy that they're going through. And it really became a tipping point for education, with whether it's with children or people considering bringing in a fur or feather child. What is that commitment? So a lot of this poetry kind of came through that voice. And then we just started reading to Pepper, and he really loves being read to. I think it's just more that soothing tone of voice, more than really understanding the story itself. But he really enjoys that story time. So this is a poem that was we rewrote specifically for George. It was initially went to Pepper. And so let me bring
Pepper up. Get Pepper up here.
So Auntie and Pepper can read it to George.
Yes, come on, Pepper. We have to read this to George. Come on. All right. George, Let's tweet, tweet, tweet all day long. Santa is waiting for your sweet song. Have you been a good boy all year round? Let's do something for him. This is not a whim. You have the smarts. You have the voice. Call out to Alexa. Buy a sleigh and rejoice. Have it packed with toys for that big day to give to all the pets. What more can I say?
Oh, I love it. Oh, fantastic.
That's for George. Yes.
That's brilliant. Thank you. No, that's wonderful. I
You're
love it. If
We
he could, he would order stuff on Alexa as well. I tell you.
Yeah, so be careful.
Oh, wonderful.
Rob, we look forward to seeing some of those pictures of
Yeah.
you and George and his interaction with your family. We can just post them right on Pep's Facebook page. I can send you the link. We want to keep up to date with all of his antics, his behavior, all the love and joy and funny mischief things he gets into. So please keep us posted and feel free to
Yeah, absolutely.
update us on Pep's Facebook page.
Yeah, we'll do. Absolutely.
All
We'd
right.
love to. Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, George. Bye, George.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Rob.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Rob. You like that, huh?
And that is our show for today. This is Polly Pepper and Auntie Florence wishing you all the best, running with the pack. Bye for now.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Pepper, say bye-bye.
Woof, woof.
Woof, woof. Yes, woof, woof.